Good, we're recording. So, hi everybody. You know me, I'm Jerry, and I'm with Laura Patterson today. And Laura and I have known each other for a long time. Laura is the president and founder of VisionEdge Marketing, which is based in Austin. She works with clients all over the country and has years of experience, despite her youthful appearance, working with clients to help them measure the right things. So Laura, I'm going to stop talking. That's a very brief introduction. Give my students, if you would, a little bit more background on how you got to where you are, what you major in school, what you do before VisionEdge, and how did you get here?
Okay, I will do my best. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, Jerry. So let's just talk a little bit about my story, my journey, and I'll weave in along the ways where maybe analytics and data and models and measurement kind of fit in. And then we'll, along the way of the story. So we'll pepper the story with real concrete things. That might be a good way to do this. So a long time ago, long time ago, in Missouri, which is where I'm from the Show Me State. So there you go, right there. I come from a background where it's all about being able to prove things out. I ended up working in the financial services industry. And I ended up going to college, like many of you, and I studied business with a strong bent towards communications. I really didn't study like statistics as a math major or anything like that. It was really how to apply statistics to business, as opposed to taking like going down the path of a really big like math or science degree. So I had a business background, some exposure to market research, marketing science, which I really loved. Marketing science as a capability has been in marketing for a very long time. Of course, back then it was very much more traditional around how do you construct a survey, particularly that was probably most often a mail-in survey or a focus group survey or a mystery shopping type of approach. Today we have obviously way different ways of handling and getting data. We didn't have social media back then. This is a long time ago in a land far away. So the tools we have today and the ways we have to get data are different today. But the very important thing to know about marketing science and marketing research compared to, for example, getting data that we can from various sources today is that it always starts with a hypothesis or a question. And so you're looking to understand and the implications of the data and what you're learning in context of a question. So I think that's a very important distinction when we look at data. I want to come back to that as we have this conversation going forward. So in my one of my first jobs in financial services, my title was Customer Relationship Manager, which was long before CRMs existed, which I know that most people think of customer relationship management as a tool, but I actually had a job called Customer Relationship Manager, which meant that my responsibilities had to do with engaging with customers that were already existing customers and understanding how we could, what we call, grow our share of wallet, which is a very common phrase in the financial services industry, increase our customer lifetime value by expanding the number of products, which we refer to in the financial services industry, among our customer base. So that's essentially was my job. So you can see some important measures were coming into place. Things like share of wallet and like customer lifetime value. Now, again, I want you to try to envision my world a little bit back then, because this is a very long time ago, once upon a time kind of thing. We had a computer, but that computer was tied to a mainframe, and there was no real data at my fingertips. Instead, my domain of data was a result of what I could get out of the myriad, and I mean myriad, of manila folders that contained our customer data. So literally we had a doorway into a closet, and that closet, if you can envision it, was just rows and rows and rows of manila folders, and that contained customer information. And so my very first project was to create a data schema for how we would look at our customers. How could we create customer profiles, and how could we do customer segmentation, which is very important things to be able to do with data and analytics. And so I came to work. I would pull out these files, and I was going through every single file trying to find what I could use as ways to code and create a code for customers. And as I started, I might look at things like education, number of, whether they rent or own, what kinds of products they currently have, are they married, do they have children, things like that. And after I did about a number of those, I could begin to see some common ways I could look at that data. And then after I did about 100 of them, I realized that some new things came up. And so I had to go all the way back and start all over again, right? As I looked at how I could build out a way to understand who our customers were. And in those days, because we didn't have a computer that we could put all this in, I used those little round, sticky like circles that come in different colors, and I color coded my stuff, and then I just put those color codes on the end of every folder. And so now I could look down at all of my of our customers, and when Dwight would come in and say, how many customers do we have X, and X might be related to the green little stickies, I could go and I could count how many of those. Now that would be a pretty big undertaking, right? And eventually I created a spreadsheet, so I had that information, but again, very labor intensive. Aren't we lucky that we have so many better tools today that we can collect that information and manipulate that data? So that's one of the—
Laura, you bring up such an important point. I mean, I can't even imagine you having to do all that by hand, no computer aid at all. My students won't remember I said this, although I did. Go back and check the lectures. I said that you couldn't do it at scale. I mean, there's no way the process you just described, you could do at scale, which, I mean, I can't imagine, could you?
But it was, I mean, certainly was very challenging, but it was a great way, it was a great start of having nothing to having something, right?
Sure, it was a big evolutionary step.
Yeah, a big, really important first step. So that was an example, right? So here we're talking about how you use data. And so I wasn't really performing significant analytics, but I was organizing the information about our customers into ways that we could have some data that I could do some analysis about which customers were more, these customers who looked like this had these products. Are there any other customers that look like that don't have those products that maybe we could make an offer to? But Dwight used them in a different way. Dwight would come to me and say, so how many of our customers are baseball fans? And I would look and see how many customers were baseball fans. Remember, I'm from Missouri, St. Louis, Cardinals, big deal, baseball, big deal. And I would come back and tell him, and he would say, so I want you to go down to the stadium and I want you to buy 2 tickets for every customer across all the games that are coming out. And I would go and buy tickets. And then I would mark on another spreadsheet which customers were going to get which tickets. And Dwight would have me send out a note that said, happen to come across these baseball tickets, know how much you love the game, have a great time. And my job was to send those out, right? And then about 3 days after the game, Dwight, based on my spreadsheet, would call those customers up, and his opening would be, how was the game, right? And so this was a way for him to begin to have conversations with customers, and he knew what they liked. They, of course, accepted his phone call, and that's how he would then proceed with another thing that would be my indication of what might be a good offer for that customer. It could just be an annual review if we didn't have anything else, or it could just be something else. So you could see how, again, we used that information to make offers and understand what more about our customers. So I did that for a while.
Well, Laura, let me interrupt you. That you just made is a lot of organizations wouldn't have done the upfront analysis. They would have just said, you know what, send a bunch of baseball tickets out. We'll see if we land anything. And you took an analytical approach. Even though it was paper-based, you did it anyway. You went in there. You were able to figure out who in the customer base you had access to was the right ones to send the offer. And you got, in our business, what we would call higher conversion as a result of your analytic work. So sorry, I had to throw that out there.
Exactly. Well, Exactly. And not only for baseball, but we did that for football. We did that for the Fox Theater. We did that for the St. Louis Symphony, you know, all different kinds of things because people like different things. And that was a great way. But what it did do is certainly increase the number of likelihood to have a conversation. Because in his business, no conversation, no business, right? You don't get anywhere without a conversation. And so my job was to create those conversations. And this was a way of doing that. So that's just an example of how you can create simple schemas with data and use that data to do some analysis that can help you with figuring out how to engage with a customer, very simply. So from there, I took a job in the healthcare industry. And that was, again, had a very strong analytics approach. It was more of a back office job. I didn't do that very long because it led to another opportunity while I was in graduate school to do some other things. And it led to an opportunity in a startup that had a application that ran on a Wing 2200. So remember I said a long time ago.
So at least now we're using computers though.
We're using a computer. And my job was marketing, sales, customer service, the whole thing for this startup, everything that wasn't on the technical side. And they had a very strong service bureau business, and they wanted to convert the service bureau business or some of those into customers and then expand. So it was really all about taking existing customers and upgrading them, right? So it was upgrading them to customers that would buy the software product, and then my job would be then to train them on how to use the product themselves. But one of the things that we did in our service bureau that was part of my job and part of teaching them is that the reporting that came out of the system, the application, how do you use that data to make decisions for your business? So this was a different way of helping our customers. So we would run these reports at the end of every month, and that would help them make some decisions about what kind of inventory they should carry or not, what kind of things they might need to write off or not, what kinds of markets might be best for them in terms of the kinds of products or services in the healthcare industry they carried. So you can see there, our application actually gave them data. We didn't really do a lot of modeling around them, but it helped them make decisions about their business. And that was part of my job, was not only selling the product and implementing it and teaching them how to use it, but actually also teaching them how to look at the data and make a decision about that. And while I was doing that work, I was doing a tremendous amount of traveling. I was footloose and fancy free, and I had customers everywhere for this little company. And a number of those customers were in Texas. So I'm in Florida working for this company because I went to the University of South Florida, where I went to graduate school. And my graduate school degree was really a interdisciplinary degree that involved organizational communication, business, again, not very much on the sciences side, but had the notion of how to, had a very strong analytics. So like, for example, rhetorical analysis and things like that. So my thesis in my graduate studies was around looking at labor relations and being able to see why certain things were predictable. And so my thesis was on why the PATCO breakup was predictable and why that happened. And so I used an analysis to take a look at the emergence of unions and labor unions and why what happened with PATCO occurred. And so that was what I learned in school, was applying that kind of analysis. But back to, I digress.
You know, Laura, I think that you and I are of the age, I don't want to say old enough, but we are of the age, we lived through what you're referring to with PATCO. So for my students' benefit, there used to be a union for air traffic controllers. They went on strike, and the president at the time, I believe it was Ronald Reagan, early in his first administration said, you know what, we're done with you. and that was the end of that union. But anyway, when you say PATCO, I think that's what you're referring to, and you did some work.
It is what I'm referring to. And it was not, and what I was actually trying to say is my analysis predicted that was going to occur. So it was about using data and historical data and building out some key things that would say, this is how this is going to end. This is going to end with the end of this union, and what the implications were, and how my analysis came to that conclusion. And then true enough, that's exactly what happened. So
that was in the 80s. And so you were already dabbling in predictive analytics in the 80s.
Yes, this was the very, very beginning of the 80s. Because I ended up in Austin working for Motorola in 82. So that gives you a little bit of context. And where I was going with that is I'm footloose and fancy free, and I have a lot of customers in Texas. And while I'm flitting around in Texas, I have some friends getting their PhD at the University of Texas. I had decided not to go on for my PhD, but I would stop in and say hello to them. And so while I was on a flight one day between Austin and Dallas, I was sitting next to a gentleman who was on his way to Chicago. He worked for Motorola. We got to talking, and he said, you know, we have a little startup here in Austin in our, in the semiconductor business. I think you'd be a really good fit. You've got some startup experience, you've got some marketing and sales experience, you know, call this guy. And he gave me the name of someone. Call this guy and tell him that you met me, and, you know, see if you guys can hook up. And maybe, you know, there might be an opportunity for you. And so I did. I called him, and eventually on one of my trips, I met with him, Frank. And that is how I ended up in Texas. I took a job working in another startup. And that led into a brand new business, that a microcontroller business was what we had. And the world was evolving. At that point in time in the semiconductor world, we were 4-bit microcontrollers, predominantly in NMOS. And here I was, a different kind of technology. And we were on the verge of 8-bit microcontrollers in CMOS. So bigger chips that could do more, had more integration in a better technology. So that led to some really interesting opportunities. And why I'm bringing that up is I'm still working with a computer on my desk that blinks green at me. I still don't have really any data at my fingertips where I can manipulate it on my own. I can send queries to the MIS, which is the Management Information System, which is a precursor to many of the kinds of systems we have today. And I would get some information back in a report that I could then use to try to make some decisions. But essentially, it was all very manual. Now, what is important here is that I'm about to make a segue from talking about data and analysis and analytics to measurement. So data is a very big pool, right? A very big category in term that refers to pieces of information. So a zip code is a piece of information, but it doesn't measure anything. And how tall Jerry is also a piece of information, which measures something, but is not really something we can change, because Jerry isn't going to get any taller. And weight, which is another measure of something, which is changeable. So you got to understand that there's different kinds of data elements, and it's stored in different kinds of places, right? So someone's education is a piece of data, and how much money someone makes is a piece of data, and someone's title is a piece of data, and some of that is a measure and some of that isn't, right? And inside data, you have measures, as we just referred to, and these are things that tell us quantity of something, how much, how big, how far, whatever. It's not really an indicator of value, it just is a value, right? So how many people have green eyes is measuring something, right? But it's not really a metric in the sense that it's not a standard of measurement that we use. But on the other hand, if you are, know what your heart rate is, there is a standard about what is an acceptable blood pressure, for example, based on your size and your age. And so that's a metric. And when you are in or outside those parameters, gives you an indicator of your health, right? So when you go to the doctor and they take your blood pressure, if that blood pressure doesn't seem to be in the right parameters, they might have concerns and want to know that. And so blood pressure is an actual metric. It's a measure of health. And so in business, we can begin to look at measures of health, like how many net new customers you're bringing on, or what the conversion rate might be. And so, like, for example, if you're a SaaS company, a software as a service company, trial to customer the metric might be 26%. And so if your company is at 10%, then you might be wanting for your industry, I'll say 26% for your industry, and you're at 10%, then you might know that you need to do something to get better because you're below what would be considered a good parameter. But if you're at 30%, you could say, yeah, we're doing pretty good. We might want more, but we're okay, right? And if you're at 60%, you could say, wow, we've got a really good engine. So while the boss might be unhappy with 60%, it's actually a really good number. And so a metric helps you to assess whether or not you have a good number. And then from that, you can begin to think about what kinds of metrics, and metrics can span, I'm counting something like how many things I'm doing, how many trade shows I'm going to, or events I'm holding. Not a whole lot of value, but it might at least give some indication into activity, versus how many new contacts I made at that event, maybe a little bit better value, versus how many of those contacts turned into conversations of engagement that are leading to, are in the right target market that are going to turn into real appointments that might be becoming part of your pipeline. That might be a better measure, more tied to an outcome, right? And so you're different kinds of measures, and they formed a chain, so to speak, with getting better and better as you go through. So that's a metric. And over time, you can use analytics to get better at both building measures, way to measure, but you also can use analytics like what market segments are the best segments for us to pursue. So that's also applying analytics that really isn't a measure of anything, but still is analytics to help you make a better decision. Regardless of whether it's a metric or a model or whatnot, the key is a value of analytics is to support a decision. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yes, exactly. You know, that's kind of an emphasis point for me. I have a slide, I can think of it, hopefully my students remember it too, is what's the point of analytics? What is the right or best output of the analytics process? And what I say is it's decisions. It's what you just said. We don't do analytics just because we can go grab data and do a bunch of analysis because it's fun. We do it because we're trying to improve the quality of decision making around some really strategic areas of the business,
or even tactical, both strategic and tactical, right? But what a good thing is, a nice segue, is that if you are just boiling the ocean of data, which we have so much more of now, because we're now in the 80s, so we've gone a decade plus, right? We have already in the 80s. If you're just boiling the data and you don't really know what the right question, you don't necessarily going to get valuable information. So here we are, we're in the 80s. I'm working in the semiconductor company. And remember, I have just blinking screens. And one of the things that's interesting, and even though I've been reporting numbers like how many appointments I had in the previous job and how many of those converted to customers and how many of those I onboarded and how many of those whatever turned into referrals for new business, which were things that might be measures when I was at the startup in Florida, I'm now in a different kind of company that's much more structured. And even though I'm in a startup, it's not a startup company. It's Motorola. And it is a huge company. It's been around since, World War II, right? So, and it has all different kinds of products. So I'm in one little business unit inside this very, very large global company. And one of the things that this global company has a process was a thing known as operations reviews. And operations reviews were at the end of every month, starting at the very bottom, you would make a presentation about your function and how it was, what it was doing to move the business forward. And this is in the days, again, before we had things like PowerPoint and other tools. And so we made these using a plastic sheet we called a foil that was produced by 3M. And we would take those sheets and we would put them on an overhead projector. So I just want you to try to envision that, because I would make my foils, which were very labor intensive. Again, we're back to something labor intensive. You would type them up. We had word processing by then. We had word processing tools. We would take those and we would put them through a Xerox machine that would allow you to feed the sheets through. And that's how we would make these foils. And we thought it was like huge progress when we could actually hit the print button from the word processing machine to a printer where you could print out those foils instead of having to run them through the Xerox machine. All right, so we would take our foils and we would make our presentation, and your boss would collect all the foils, and he would go to his ops review, and literally they were almost always men. So we'd go to his ops review, and what did he do? Do you think he made a bunch of foils? No. He picked out of all the foils from his team, the ones he was going to present. And he would then give those to his boss. And his boss would collect all his foils. And so all the way up to the top of the organization. So no one made foils past the very bottom. So there was an old saying at Motorola, if your foils aren't going up, neither are you. All right, so you want to keep that in mind. So I'm presenting what I'm doing in marketing. Remember, I'm marketing in this organization, and I'm presenting things like, here's how many trade shows we went to, here's how many new names we got, here's how many people, here's the promotional campaign we ran. Remember, this is very early, we don't have social media, so here's the direct mail campaign we ran, and here's the coupon we offered, and here's how many coupon replies we got. Or here's the offer we're making right now in our ads for an evaluation board. Here's how many evaluation boards we've shipped, right? So those would be the kinds of things we might measure. So there's measures, right? At the same time, we're applying some analytics around our buyers. Are they engineers? Are they purchasing people? So we're doing some things like that. When we're beginning to look at what kinds of markets are they in? And is there any nuances between the kinds of markets that they're in and the kinds of products that they buy? So we're applying some analytics like around that, like, wow, the people that are in the consumer electronics space are using some different kinds of products and using them differently than people that are potentially in the automotive industry, right? So we're starting to look and do some analysis around that, which is helping us make some decisions about segmentation. All right, so here I am. I'm making these presentations. I'm working for this gentleman for about 6 months, and I get invited to sit in his presentation. Now remember how much I'm laboring over these foils. And I'm in the presentation. I'm sitting in the peanut gallery, the back of the room, and you're escorted in for when your boss is making a presentation, and escorted out, and you're just expected to be there to observe. And so I'm observing, and I notice that Gary makes his presentation, and in it are not one single marketing slide, not one. So I don't sit very far from Gary. I sit on a corner inside this big room. I actually have a space of my own. You have to envision the world, just like a big room, a pit full of cubicles, and I'm sitting in one of those, but I'm sitting on the wall, and he comes out from his office on a regular basis as he goes to visit other members of the team. And he always usually stops and says hello, usually to give me something to do, like order some socks, I'm going to Japan, or something like that. So while he stops by my office after the ops review, to give me a request, I ask him if he has a minute, and he stops, and I say to him, Gary, I noticed that none of my foils were in your presentation today. I think, let me say that differently. I think I said something like, thanks for letting me come to the ops review. And then I said something like, I noticed that none of my foils were in your presentation at the ops review. What could I have given you that would have been more helpful? And that was sort of my question. And his response to that, and I've told this story before because it was a very important moment in my career. And his response to that was, what is your job? And I was kind of stunned into silence, which maybe you could realize now that I've been talking nonstop, doesn't happen very often. And so I was stunned into silence, and we had this moment, and I wasn't really sure what to say, and I was thinking I'm about to lose my job. And when he fills it in, and he tells me what my job is. And he says to me, I know you're not in sales, so I'm not expecting you to close a deal, but I am expecting you to create a buying climate. And I'm expecting you to move the ball down the field when it comes to the kinds of things we're trying to create in terms of success for the organization. Here's what success for the organization looks like. And he rattles off what those are. which customers, which markets, which products, blah, blah, blah. And he's rattling them off, and I'm doing my best to write them down. He goes, and so I expect you to be able to do X, Y, and Z around each one of those things. And I'm thinking, I know that, but I don't really have that written down anywhere. He says, so I'd like to know every month what you're doing in reference to those things that I'm expecting of you around ROM codes and mask sets and blah, 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 that he's reeling off as they relate to the automotive market and the consumer electronics market and the communications market. He's rattling those off. And these particular customers, and he's rattling those off. And how are we expanding our footprint inside this customer base? And how are we getting our toehold into this particular market? And what are we doing to get these 5 important new customers that will give us a strong landing position in this segment? So he's rattling all that off, and he says, so can you put that in your foils? And I'm
sure. Give me a second.
Exactly, Jerry. I said, yes, I can do that. And I have to tell you, I hadn't a clue how I was going to do that. Not a clue. And not only that, I don't have any data. I have no tools to do that. But I do know one thing. Everything is kept in finance because it's all about the money, right? So I have an analyst that works in our group, and I head over to the analyst and I say to Enrique, I'd like to do something different next month for the ops review. Here's what I'd like to do, because I just had a conversation with Gary and he would like to have information like this. How might we do that? And so we began to frame up some ways we might do that. And that became the beginnings of our dashboard, a marketing dashboard. And that,
Laura, I'm sorry, I got to interject because you have helped me again illustrate a really important point. One of the things I've shared with my students is you can't succumb to the temptation of measuring what's easy to measure. You can't look at data and say, well, because we have data about this thing or that thing, then that's what we're going to measure because it'll be easy. And instead, your story perfectly illustrates the need to first determine what are the important things we should measure and track, and then we'll figure out where we get the data. And that's what you just shared. That's why I love that.
Yes, and that's exactly such a great point. We do have a tendency, and right now because we have so many great tools, we have a tendency to click on the button that says dashboard or report. And we click on that button, we think that's going to give us what we want. But if we are responsible to the business, and back to Gary's point, move the ball down the field, and we're responsible for doing that, then we need to know what a touchdown looks like. And we need to know what we're expected to do to help do that. And then we need to measure how well we did it. And so it isn't really just about how many emails we sent out or how many people opened or how many people clicked, because clearly I was telling Gary, here's how many people came to the trade show. Here's how many people responded to the 1-800 number that we have for this ad. Here's how many people filled out the coupon, right? That's similar. He wasn't really interested in that. What he really wanted to know was these other things. And I could get to those other things. And in order to get to those particular things, we still needed to have people respond to the ad and call the 1-800 number and come to the trade show. But that was the beginning of the journey, not the end of the journey. And what he was looking for was more information about something closer to the end of the journey, knowing that I didn't close the deal. And so I think that many times the work that we do in marketing, we're at the beginning of the journey and we stop with our numbers there and not recognize that we need to also own things further in, because we impact those and show how our work is connected to that. All right, so go ahead.
I'm going to break in again because
Please.
We don't have much more time left. I want to make sure I get everything I can out of you. So I may have you skip ahead a little bit and share with the students who are watching. You know what college students are studying, and these are undergrads. They're all probably within a year, maybe less, of graduating and leaving. And I think a lot of them have developed an interest in analytics and want to go pursue that either professionally or with more education. What advice would you give to these students who are listening to you what do they need to know as they prepare to exit the university and go into the real world with respect to analytics, or any other advice you want to give them?
That's a great question. And I will skip forward. So anyway, here's the thing that I think is important that I try to impress on our team and the people we work with. As we get more machine learning and artificial intelligence and all these other things out there, we're going to have much better tools to get data and mine that data, right? But those are tools to get data and mine that data. So if all you know how to do is to get data and mine data, you're really not going to have a long career, because the tools will do that. But the tools are not going to be able to interpret that in a way that will help the business leaders understand what it means and what they should do. And that means you need to be able to look at that information, not like a tool, but like, what does it mean to the business in the context of the business? And then be able to present that in a meaningful way. So it's not just about, I got the data, let me show it to you, but to be able to take that one step further and be able to communicate and articulate that in ways that are meaningful, compelling, and relevant to the people in the business. So clicks and opens and all that is interesting, but remember Gary, he didn't care about any of that. He needed me to put things in the context of what it means to the business. And so that's where you have the opportunity, because the artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, all those things, they're all going to be faster than us, right? But they're only going to be able to go so far. And so we need to be able to understand what is being produced out of the tool, how to communicate that and translate that and use it to say, here's the recommendations based on that. Now, what that means is we have to apply intelligence to what we are looking at. So you have to be able to be somewhat skeptical when you look at your data and make sure it makes sense. So when like this very recent and sad situation that's been going on about the virus opens up and shows us how important it is to be skeptical about the data, because the models that were initially created were only as good as the data that go in, and only as good as the assumptions you make. And so a lot of decisions were made based on that. Well, they were the best we could make at the time, but now that we have more data and better assumptions, we can see that those early models were not correct. And therefore, new decisions need to be made. And I think this is what's really important, is you need to keep those models fresh. You need to make sure that the data is kept current, that you need to modify your assumptions, and that might lead to having to make different decisions. It's not a stagnant process. It's a dynamic one. And when you're in situations that are highly fluid, which happens a lot in business, you need to be quick and nimble at being able to adjust, right? And you have to be careful, very careful, when you're building a model and building data, that you're clear about the limitations of what you have, right? And say, this is based on the following limitations. And as you get better, you can expand what those are and say, look, it's a much better model because now we have this additional kinds of context. So I think that's a really important lesson learned most recently, right? Because we let a lot of data and analytics and models dictate things that may not have been the right decision now looking back, right?
Now
So
we're seeing it played out right now in front of our very eyes. Just like you said, it may not be a marketing application, although there's definitely a marketing connection, but everyone wants to know, when's this going to end? When will the pandemic be over? Are the measures we're taking working? And the answer to that is data. But as you said just a few minutes ago, we don't need just the data. What we really need are the insights. And I agree with you. The tools are going to get good enough, fast enough, where we as humans and marketing, we don't have to worry too much about data retrieval and manipulation. The tools will do that for us, but we still need the intellect to derive the insights. And I think that's what you were saying.
Yes, and that means that what we need is good business acumen. So being good at analytics, being good at math is you have to have good business acumen. And at VisionEdge Marketing, we started our company 20 years ago based on using data, analytics, process, and measurement to help our customers grow and create more value and improve performance. But we didn't do that with kids, right? With young people, because we need good business acumen. And so I would encourage you to get as much experience under your belt that will help you accelerate your ability to acquire business acumen, because that's what you're going to bring to that's really the value you ultimately bring to the conversation. Isn't just your ability to crunch data or look for patterns or put together a model or to, come up with, apply a particular analytical technique. Those are going to be important and you need to know how to do them. But ultimately is, what do I do with this? That's the business acumen.
Yeah, I agree. And we've talked about this before, Laura, that it's not enough to just know lots about marketing. You're going to go be part of a business and you need to understand everything you can about how that business operates. You can't just have tunnel vision and say, all I need to worry about is the marketing. The rest of the stuff related to this business is someone else's job. No, the best marketers and the best analysts are the ones who have the deepest, broadest understanding of the business.
Exactly. And that takes you back to the conversation with Gary. Remember when he was talking to me, he was really sharing, this is what's core to our business. And he was basically saying, you need to connect to what's core to our business, not just do X, Y, and Z inside marketing. And that was a very powerful and important moment, right, in my career. Personally, and what helped propel me forward for the next 14 years inside that company, and then ultimately out into the market, into other companies, and with enough experience and expertise behind me or under my belt to be able to have VisionEdge Marketing. And I'm still learning every day. I'm learning something new, either about data, about analytics, about process, right? We're all always learning.
And Laura, I'm going to close things out by saying a couple things about you. You are in the business now of working with customers to help them use their data to get the insights they need to make decisions. So I want to encourage my students to visit your website, which I believe is VisionEdgeMarketing.com.
Yes, and our new book, Fast Track Your Business.
That's right. Congratulations. You have a book that you just came out with in the past couple of months. So students, go out there and check it out. I'm sure it's available on Amazon and it's talked about on your website. And I would also add, Laura, that you do a very nice job posting to your blog. You have lots of great insights available. You should go visit VisionEdgeMarketing.com. Learn more about Laura, learn more about her business. A lot of my students, by the way, are from Texas and several from Austin. So you never know, someone may come wandering by and want to meet you in person. But just learn more about Laura and VisionEdge. But Laura,
and we have an internship open for the summer for some of your Austin students in case they're interested.
Well, I get asked about that a lot. So I will help plug that to my students. They are very interested in internships. And I know you have real internships. You don't just send people out to get coffee. You make them do real work. So
real work. Thank you for having me. I hope this was helpful, everyone.
Oh, it was wonderful. I'm sure the students will get a lot out of it. Laura, thank you again for doing this with us.
My pleasure.
Thanks.